Everybody who is joining us live, and hi to everyone who's catching the recording afterwards. This is the first iteration of a new webinar series from Bytes in collaboration with our awesome partners. We've dubbed it VR Bytes EDU, bite-sized information made for our education partners that we love working with so much. And ways centered around using VR in what our normal school looks like nowadays. No surprise here that our first webinar is on using VR right now in a COVID school year during the pandemic, utilizing that technology. We've got an awesome panel here with us today. My name's Josh Knutson. I am the Esports and VR Solutions Director over at Bytespeed. We're a Minnesota-based IT solutions manufacturer, and we've been in business for 21 years, and we started actually working with schools, and we've had a long-standing tradition of working right alongside educators and giving them the technology needs that they need to be successful in the classroom, VR being one of those. Next up on the panel, and I'll let Christine introduce herself, is Christine Lyon-Bailey.
Thanks, Josh. So I'm Christine Lyon-Bailey. I am the Chief Strategy Officer of a company called Ready Learner One. We are an innovative learning and training solutions provider focusing on emerging technology, but really all things tech. And I'm also an elementary principal and a director of technology and innovation in a school district in New Jersey. So we are living the COVID nightmare right now and figuring out how to navigate that with all the amazing resources that we have available to our students. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about how those resources and those tools are really important, and we don't want to forego them in this time of crisis, but yet reimagine them instead.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine. Next up is Harrison from Up360.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Harrison. I run a company called Up360, and we're a virtual reality development firm, and we usually build experiences that have anything to do with training, workforce development, career exploration, assessment, and I'm just a big tech enthusiast, and I've used almost every single VR headset on the market. So yeah, I bring in to the table hopefully a little bit of hardware advice.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And then finally, Corinne.
Hey, I'm Corinne Hoisington. I am an educator in Virginia. I teach both high school and college as a college professor. But most importantly for today, I am the lead trainer of Bytespeed. So I get to work with schools all over the country, well, all over several countries, working with getting VR set up in the classroom and finding out the best practices, safety, everything beyond. So let's roll, Josh.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We're really excited to have the panel here. There's a ton of members of the education and VR community that are part of our advisory board. All three of our guests today are part of that board as well, bringing together awesome content that we're excited to share today. So what are we talking about today? We're going to kind of break this down into 4 little sections. Everybody's going to have a turn presenting on a really relevant topic for right now. We're going to start off. Christine's going to take the wheel and talk about, VR's place in education, all the great things that we can do with curriculum and getting students involved. We're going to roll next to Harrison. He's going to talk about best practices for using that hardware in a very different environment than we're used to. Talk about some COVID best practices and how we can still use this tech today and be safe. Like we said, Corinne is going to talk about getting things set up in various classroom settings, give some advice on how you can plan for both in-person and hybrid education. And then finally, I'll just wrap things up by talking a little bit about the hardware solutions that we have out there. Real quick piece, just in case you're interested in getting started with VR and need some gear to get going. So with that, I'm going to give things over to Christine, and we'll kind of go from there.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Josh. So yeah, we're going to start by talking about really the educational impact of VR in the classrooms. And I think it's so important to start with, tech is only as good as what we do with it. And so I always I worry about schools and districts that bring in, VR labs and all sorts of fancy technology, and they don't take the time to think about how it's going to impact or really enhance the educational experience, because it's really important that we talk about where its place is and how it's going to bring a greater value to the student learning experience. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can bring purpose and potential to that technology. We'll talk a little bit about immersive hands-on learning in a lot of subjects and how that's, with COVID, it's kind of being put to the side, but how can we use virtual reality to kind of still provide those learning experiences and some unique tools and experiences that couldn't otherwise be possible. So Josh, there we go, perfect. All right, so I'm gonna just talk through 3 quick sort of experiences that you can utilize using VR that can really change a student's experience across multiple content areas. So we'll start with Google Earth, because everybody knows Google Earth, and if you don't, you should know it. And so Google Earth in VR literally brings the world to your students' fingertips. It's absolutely amazing. You can fly over the earth, you can walk on streets in global neighborhoods, soar over national parks. It provides all different types of perspective. So ultimately, really, what does that mean in a classroom, right? It sounds great and it sounds fancy, but what are some actual classroom applications? So the one example that is probably by far my favorite is in a writing class. So in a language arts or an English class in high school, you could take it to any level, really. Students ultimately are challenged with descriptive writing skills, right? So as kids' worlds become more and more boxed in by standards and all sorts of mandates, they start to lose a little bit of their creative perspective when they're doing their writing assignments. So I was working with a middle school language arts teacher who was having a hard time getting her students to use descriptive language when establishing setting in their writing. And so she brought them down to, we have an HTC lab in our school. So she brought them down to the lab, and what we did is we put them in cities all over the world that they weren't familiar with. So anywhere from, Moscow to Lyon, France, and wherever. And so the students would put the headset on, and they have 2 peers with them, and all of our headsets have a TV mounted on the wall so that the students who are next to the one in the headset can still see what they're seeing. And we had the student who was immersed in the experience describe their setting. What did they see around them, being unfamiliar with the environment, and to really challenge them to use descriptive language as they were describing their environment. And their peers were providing feedback during the process, saying, well, talk a little bit more about the shapes that you see in that building, or the reflections in the windows, and all sorts of things. And so the students took this experience and they went back to the classroom and they applied that perception of detail to their writing, and it totally transformed their descriptive writing skills. So I really love that example, because it's something that a lot of people would never think to use VR for that purpose, and yet it made that learning experience so much more meaningful for the kids. Some other examples. What a great way to study cultures, right? To go right down into Latin America and walk the streets of some of the cities. And if you're in a language class or a cultural studies class, to really bring alive that sort of empathetic feeling of what it's like to be in that society in a very real way, rather than just looking at photos in a textbook or reading on a website. Sustainability studies. So I love the example of our Model UN team was doing, they were assigned Japan, and they had to do sustainability of Japan. And so they actually did a topographical study of Japan and really understood the landforms and sort of the way that Japan is set up, so that they were prepared when they went to make their case with their research. They had a much stronger sense of what they were talking about because of that experience. And then in math, again, we think of VR, we think of fun, cool things. And so with math, when we talk about cityscapes, we can talk about scale of buildings, we can talk about shapes and geometry, we can talk about angles, we could talk about city blocks and ratios. And there's so many different things that you can use Google Earth and apply all different types of content areas to, and it's really a very powerful tool. So you can go to the next one, thanks. So that's kind of like a consumption-based concept of how we can use VR. So if we talk a little bit about taking the experience now and manipulating our surroundings, so not creating something entirely new, but manipulating our surroundings. Some other really meaningful examples, there's an experience called Water Bears. Oh, it says AR, it should say VR. Oops, sorry. And so Water Bears is kind of like a virtual makerspace, right? So makerspaces and STEM labs, every school was putting them in place in their buildings, and then COVID happened, and we we shut them all down, right? We packed away all the supplies. Nobody can touch anything and share it. And so we still want to give kids that opportunity to build and to engineer and design things and to test their prototypes. And so Water Bears is a really great experience that allows you to experience that. You manipulate your surroundings to unlock levels. You basically take pipes and you direct them and you create certain types of flow for water. And the students are challenged with the way of engineering and designing this flow of water using these pipes. And it's really a great way to do a virtual makerspace so that students are able to still access that concept of engineering design without having all of the physical materials that we're discouraged from using right now. And then the same thing with STEM labs. So we have a partner called Zennial Digital who has some really amazing science-based labs on their platform. And there's everything from studying velocity in a skate park to using radar in a train station, and really exploring those different STEM concepts and how they relate to the real world and to things that are of interest to students. So those are two different types of experiences where we're not just consuming content, but now we're sort of manipulating our environment or blending the idea of consuming to be able to create new experiences. And then lastly, we can take that learning to that whole new level of having students as producers of content. And this is kind of the most exciting part, I think, of what we can do with kids with VR. It's just really amazing what kids can create in VR. And, you know, we say kids, but really all the way up through the higher ed levels, there's just so much potential. So two particular tools that I just wanted to touch on was Google's Tilt Brush and Blocks, both of which allow users to create within their environment around them. And a lot of what they create in here can also be exported and printed on 3D printers, used in other different types of environments. So it's really very powerful tools. So just some examples of how we can use this creation-based tool that's very out of the box. So Tilt Brush is this like sort of art-based, right, experience where you have this canvas and you can create art. So clearly it's going to be great for an art class, but something that maybe perhaps people hadn't thought about is we have students with all different types of needs in school, right? And in particular, we have students who at times either struggle with verbal expression and or are nonverbal in their abilities to communicate. So one thing that we can do with Tilt Brush is we can actually use it as a communication tool with some of our nonverbal or verbally challenged students. And so if you have a child, let's say, who's perhaps on the autism spectrum, and they're struggling and they're feeling frustrated and they aren't able to articulate how their feelings or their emotions are impacting them at the moment, sometimes the ability to express through art, there's a lot of studies out there about art therapy, being able to express themselves through art, and then being able to sort of debrief and share that with either a case manager or a counselor or whomever is providing sort of that follow-up service to that student, depending on the circumstances. So it's just a really powerful way to give voice in a very untraditional manner. Also, it's a great tool to align to like a poetry unit. So we challenge students to create poems and then to create art that aligns with their poems. So if you've ever seen like the fountains at the Bellagio in Las Vegas where they're set to music, we can create art that flows to the rhythm of the words and to the style of the poetry. You can use that in a music composition course as well. And then just some examples for Google Blocks. Google Blocks is kind of like a building program where we can create designs and engineering design things. And so sustainability developments, one example that I love is a course that is designed to build a sustainable society. So students are challenged with doing research on sustainability measures. They're given a budget, they design the sustainable society that has all these different sustainability measures embedded into it. And then the teacher actually challenged them to design a prototype of their development through Google Blocks. So actually built their own little city, kind of like Minecraft-ish, but done through the headset in Google Blocks, and then actually exported it and printed it through a 3D printer. We had all these little societies set up and we invited people in to see them and explain and learn how they worked. And then prototyping. So any kind of an EDP type class that's gonna challenge students to come up with a prototype, iterate through it, improve it, print it out, test their products, and really challenge them to continue developing and iterating and not just being done with their first try, but really taking it to the next level. So all of these examples are ways that we can encourage the use of the technology, but in a really meaningful and purposeful way. And so don't pack it up because of COVID, because Harrison's going to tell you how you can keep using it despite the germs. So Harrison.
Is it myself next or is Corinne going next? Oh, hardware. Yep. Totally up to you guys.
Go, Harrison.
Cool. Okay. Well, yeah. So,
one slide that moved.
Sorry.
No worries, no worries. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about hardware and kind of the recommendations that we've kind of collected, and they're just simply recommendations, and they're kind of a collection of stuff that we've been getting in from some of the centers that we're supporting, some of our own recommendations, some of the articles that have been shared online, and we've kind of tried to pick through a little bit of everything and give you guys the most relevant kind of up-to-date stuff that is out there. So I'm just going to kind of go over three different areas. One, I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of cleaning and sanitization practices that you guys can use. Two, I'm going to dive into some of the hardware sharing practices. So how do you share hardware, especially if you're a site with maybe only one or two sets of gear, with one school or multiple schools. And then there's another slide in here that you guys will be able to have as a take home, which would give you some helpful links and resources to kind of direct you through some of the things that I end up talking about. So Josh, if you want to jump to the first slide there. So when it comes to keeping your VR headset clean, and this is something that I've always been OCD about, even prior to all this COVID stuff. The first thing that you guys are going to want to make sure that you can do is actually clean your headset. A lot of the headsets that are on the market today, the HTC Vive, the Vive Pro, the Oculus Rift S, they actually come with like this kind of spongy, super soft material on the faceplate, but it's actually sweat absorbent, and it can kind of hold a little bit of dirt and stuff. So that's something that you want to check on your hardware. I can't count the number of times I've went into a school that has a VR lab and it's like they didn't even change out the kind of the default faceplate that stuff comes with. So that's your step one. And when it comes to the faceplates, there's a couple of really good solutions out there that are tried and tested, and some that we've settled on and kind of only use now. There's two different options. One that we kind of started using for quite some time is this little PU leather faceplate, and it's actually just like a little Velcro faceplate that sticks right onto like the frame of the headset. This one is good. It's comfortable, it's soft, but I think the only downside with this is that you actually have to rip off the old face cover entirely. And then put some Velcro on there, and then put that on. But once you have the Velcro on, you can replace as many of these as you want. Typically, we'll go through maybe one or two per headset per year. With the extra cleaning, you might go through a little bit more. But once it's on there, that's a great solution. The other solution that unfortunately they don't have for all headsets, but they have for some of the major branded headsets, is a little silicone cover. And it's basically like this blue little silicone kind of grip thing that sits right on the headset, and it actually just slips right over top of the faceplate and the existing foam. So the install is super, super nice. It does take a minute to actually get it on there. But once you kind of figure out the trick and you have it on there, it's super comfortable. It's soft on the skin, and you can kind of wipe it down completely. And it pretty much covers up 100% of that kind of that foam absorbent material that would otherwise kind of be sucking up your sweat. So that's kind of the first thing, is make sure your headset can actually be cleaned. And if you have a headset with an out of the box faceplate, make sure that you get a different one that can be wiped down and that can be sanitized. And typically our go-to place for that kind of stuff is Amazon. They've got everything and anything on there. And other than Amazon, there's a website called vrcover.com that you can buy a lot of accessories for a lot of different headsets on. Going to the next slide here. Once you've made sure that you can clean your headset, you're going to want to be cautious in terms of what type of wipes you use for your headset. In the early days, when we were kind of just in a rush trying to grab something, we just grab any old cleaning wipe off the top of the shelf. But we really quickly realized that making sure the proper wipes, it kind of ensures that you still have a good experience. You want to avoid using anything with scents. You want to avoid using alcohol-based wipes. Alcohol-based wipes can be a little bit abrasive and actually harsh on the device, and kind of wear things down. And then when it comes to scents, a lot of people do not react kindly to scented products. So you want to just make sure that when you are selecting the wipes to use to sanitize things, that it kind of checks off 3 boxes. So box number 1 is that it's actually some type of sanitizing wipe. It'll kill bacteria. It'll kind of clean the gear properly. Box number 2 is you want to make sure it's hypoallergenic. That's super important to make sure that anybody who does have a sensitivity to any type of cleaning chemicals isn't going to react poorly to it. And then the third and final thing is you want to avoid anything with like an oil-based moisturizer or lotion in it. It'll just kind of leave, it'll leave the headset moisturized, but it won't feel nice for the next person putting it on. So the kind of go-to wipes that we pick up nowadays are these little VR cover friendly cleaning wipes, and it basically says right on it, they're safe for the technology, they're individually packed, so you never have to worry about them drying out, and they are also hyperallergenic and alcohol free. So they check all the boxes. You could get these from the VR Cover website. They're not very expensive, and you get a big box of 100, which will last you guys a couple of months. So one of our recommendations, if you're in a hurry and you just need something quick, we have had some luck with like the Wet Ones brand, or even the like the Lysol skin safe wipes. But again, kind of the general rule of thumb when it comes to wipes is if you wouldn't want to wipe your face with it, you're not going to want to clean your VR headset with it. So yeah, wipe selection, super important. And the one other little kind of thing on the whole note of wipes is making sure when you are cleaning down the headset, you are cleaning down everything, you don't actually wipe the lenses with the chemical wipe, because it can kind of abrade the lens and make it foggy. Next slide there. You don't have to play this video, Josh. It's just there, just showing that there is a little bit more of an in-depth video, and yes, same background, same shirt, but there is a little bit more of an in-depth video going into exactly how to step-by-step clean your headset. The first thing, especially now when we're talking about making sure everything is sanitized, is make sure that one, you have clean hands, and everybody should have a bottle of Purell within like 3 feet of them nowadays. So make sure your hands are sanitized, or you've washed your hands, clean the surface that you're going to be putting the headset on. And then when you're actually starting to clean the headset, pay really close attention to the areas that are going to come in contact with somebody's face. Oftentimes in the little nose slot in here, there's a little silicone piece. People will forget to clean that. And a really good test is somebody wearing a lot of makeup. Put them in the headset, have them play around with it for a little bit, take it off, give it a clean. If you can see any makeup left in that headset, you did not do a good job cleaning it. So yeah, pay really close attention to all of those parts that are coming in contact with somebody's face. Don't forget and don't be shy about wiping down the foam pads on the back and the side of the headset. So for example, this one here is the Vive Pro. You still have that material that is kind of a softer foam on the back and on the sides. That typically is just touching your hair, so we don't really bother replacing that with like a leather one. But don't be shy about actually wiping that down. And yes, it will hold a little bit of the cleaner, but then just make sure when you put the gear down that you let it dry for a few minutes, so that foam piece, the Velcro strap, pretty much everywhere where you're going to be touching and cleaning has a couple of seconds to dry off. And then also don't forget to clean the controllers, because again, any high touched area, you really want to make sure that you sanitize that as best as you possibly can. Pre-COVID, we were recommending that facilitators and teachers would actually help the student put the headset on. But now that we're kind of in a new world, we're flipping that around. So when the person who's kind of running the session cleans the headset, you want to put the headset and the controllers down in an area where the next person will be able to pick it up and put it on themselves, so that you don't have to actually get up in close and personal with that person. They can basically just gear up themselves. And then if you jump to the next slide here, Josh, the other thing that you can do for kind of added peace of mind, or if you can't get those face covers that stick on the actual headset themselves, there's a couple of different cleaning accessories out there that are like those added accessories. Some sites will choose to use them. Some sites might not choose to use them, depending on, again, who your organization is and kind of the protocols you have around. These little one-time use disposable VR covers are nice to have on hand. Even if they're optional, some students might want to use them just for that added level of comfort and protection. And basically they just sit on your face like little masks there, so that you really never come in contact at all with that faceplate. And especially for anybody wearing makeup, those are extra nice, because then you don't have to worry about the headset kind of shifting around and smudging makeup, anything like that. And then the other resources on the next slide here that I threw together kind of quickly for everyone is just little how to put on the headset videos. So they're just quick 2-minute videos. And the whole purpose of them is, now that somebody's kind of expected to put the headset on themselves, it's a video walking you through how, if I was about to put the headset on, how do I do that? So making sure the first thing you do, put the wrist straps around your arms. Then from there, putting actual headset on and being able to kind of get it adjusted and get it comfortable without a facilitator kind of coming up to you and adjusting everything. And again, just making sure that participants and people who are going to be using the equipment, washing their hands, making sure things are sanitized, and you're sanitizing the gear in between each and every use, so that everybody has kind of a fresh, clean headset before they're jumping into it next. So that's kind of the cleaning and sanitizing stuff. Again, there's a couple of video links that are included in the last 2 slides. So for anybody who wants to see like a very detailed walkthrough video, about 10 minutes long, of like cleaning everything, diving a little deeper into the wipes, you can watch those. And then as well, we'll have 3 or 4 videos on how to put on the headset for Oculus Rift S, for the Vive Pro. I think we also are going to make one for probably the Windows Mixed Reality stuff, just so that you have a quick 2-minute video to use as a resource, download onto your system, and show students right before they put the headset on, so they know exactly what they're doing. Next slide there. Some best practices for actually sharing the hardware. I think schools and organizations have totally changed quite drastically. So again, depending on your organization, you might choose to use 1 or 2 of these, but there are a lot of variation from one site to the next and one VR lab to the next. But one of the big recommendations that we have, and that a lot of sites are starting to use, is try to minimize the daily sharing. And I don't mean minimize the amount of students going through it, but minimize the amount of sharing amongst classes and amongst sites. We work with a lot of centers that share like one VR system across several dozen school boards, or one VR system shared with 2 or 3 different organizations. But kind of in this new way, the kind of the recommended thing here is that you keep it at one class or at one location per day. When at all possible. So instead of giving it to the biology class in the morning and the business class in the afternoon, start scheduling per day. So it would be the biology class gets to use it one day, and then the science class gets to use it the other day. That again just minimizes the amount of crossover on the day-to-day. And if everybody is kind of in their own little pods anyways, amongst the class, there's just a little bit more confidence amongst people knowing that they're just going to be using it with the same groups on a daily basis that they're with anyways. Try to work in small groups as much as possible. And if you are working in larger groups, make sure that the rooms you're going to be using it in will allow for a sufficient amount of space for social distancing. So don't go and cram 10 or 20 students in a little tiny room. If you want to have the whole class watch it, break them out into small groups and facilitate activities that way, especially if now you'll have the VR for an entire day for a single class. Break it into groups. It'll make it a lot more comfortable for everyone. And next to just making sure you're socially distanced, the more VR space you have when you're running these experiences, the more enjoyable we've always found them to be. And then try to designate one person as the controller who's operating the laptop. And then if that controller changes in between, just make sure that you're, again, not forgetting to sanitize the laptop. And then if you do have a full-fledged VR lab and you're going to be having 4 or more headsets in one dedicated space, or if you're a VR arcade or a center like that, maybe consider looking at more robust cleaning solutions like the Clean Box. If you don't have more than 3 headsets, we think the CleanBox is a little bit overkill, but for any site that's going to have high turnover, that has a ton of units, and you're going to be still trying to operate them at capacity, the CleanBox is a great option because you basically stick the headset in there. It cleans it with a UV light. It only takes 2 or 3 minutes. You pull it out, and then you can put the next headset in, and the next headset in, and the next headset in, just to kind of get that good turnover and that good flow. But again, for the smaller sites, the recommendations that I had mentioned before will be more than enough to keep things nice and clean. And then I think there's one more slide here on my end. Yeah, so this slide here, we'll just defer you guys to a couple of different resources. So vrcover.com and Amazon is the place where you can get all of the hygiene accessories that I mentioned. You can get those little removable face cushions. You can get the cleaning wipes. If you need wipes in a hurry, Walmart or Target, they typically have that Wet Wipes brand. And then the more advanced cleaning solution is at cleanboxtech.com for any sites that have 4 or more headsets. We definitely recommend checking that out. And then there's a video of, again, putting on the different headsets linked there, and then a more in-depth guide into actually step-by-step how to clean your headset so you don't miss any spots. So yeah, those are some of our recommendations and just some tips and tricks that we found online, and hopefully you can take bits and pieces of them and start up using VR again.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Harrison. We'll make sure that the presentation is available after we're done here for everybody so that you can follow those links. Also, I'd imagine you can just search Up360, go to their website where those videos will be housed, or search on YouTube and be able to find them. So thank you so much for sharing all those resources. Next up, we're going to have Corinne talk a little bit more about how to actually get these experiences scheduled into classes and how we can actually operate them in a school environment. So I'm going to stop sharing here, and we'll let Corinne kind of hijack the presentation, and she'll have her resources up on screen in just a second.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. What an awesome job, both of you. My goodness, everyone's been great. You know, my theme in all of this is not to limit a child to our own learning, for he or she was born in another time. And yes, this time has changed a little bit more than we expected. 2020, well, let's face it, is not what we expected, but there's so many neat opportunities. And even though we may be in an alternate schedule, so many schools are now doing things like A/B scheduling. In other words, they may be at school one day and another day remote. Some schools are doing 4 days in person, 1 day remote. We are seeing schools going all remote. So it really becomes more challenging. And even though you may start in one format, it may not stay in that format, correct? So in Virginia, where I'm coming from today, we're about 50-50. About 50% of our schools are staying home for the first 9 weeks. The other 50% are doing some kind of alternate scheduling. I don't know any school that's really going a complete regular day, at least in our neck of the woods. But we really feel that virtual reality can be the fuel for the learning journey. And how do we do that and make a learning system that is scalable and wildly entertaining? I know that's up for debate, right? So we can awaken a student's curiosity. And I think that's important. Let's think about that student's curiosity. If we're in a setting where we have some kind of blended learning or alternate format, I think we really need to start thinking of education right now like this tool chest. I think we're going to have a lot of great tools to use for remote learning. I think we need tools to work in the classroom. I think we have to have more social, emotional learning. We have so much going on right now. The new term in 2020 is called phygital learning. It's where we have physical face-to-face learning, and then we also have digital learning in whatever format that is. And if you combine the word physical and digital, you get phygital. So how can we pull VR into this phygital learning environment? So right now, what we're really seeing out there is a unique blend of how we can use in-person and online. So let's talk VR, but first, the first thing that I always talk about when I'm talking about blended learning is well-being check first, safety first. And I love that's how we started today. we want to make sure that we are completely safe in everything that we do and that the student we're checking in on. I think the in-person days give us a perfect opportunity for inquiry-based questions and deep learning with VR. And I'm about to show you some examples of what I mean by that. But a time that we really introduce the topic and really dig in. For example, I asked a 3rd grade class the other day, do you think dinosaurs actually drink the same water that we drink today? We were talking about the water cycle. So we start with that inquiry-based question and then started to use some VR apps that taught about dinosaurs and really show them what their world looked like and the water cycle. And if they lived a long time ago, would they still be drinking the same water today? So by using VR in a small group learning, it could be where we have one headset and we allow each student maybe 3 or 4 minutes when they're face-to-face to see this dinosaur environment. And then we give it at least a couple minutes in between and make sure for the younger grades that we wipe it down, or for older grades that they wipe down their equipment, getting it ready for the next student, and then continue that process throughout our students. And then when they're online, take what they learned in VR and really leverage that into a digital content to dig into the deep learning and higher level thinking skills, and really create self-paced, clearly defined at-home activities that really accentuate what they're learning. Now, Christine mentioned earlier, let's say in a class, we are trying to get the students to understand descriptive writing. She talked about Google Earth. We might have that time in person to do that lab where they see every city around the world, but then in the online environment might be a great time to now think through what they saw in person and now start to write. And I think we have to do our lesson plans in that fashion. And there are a lot of these deep learning experiences to get their motivation, their curiosity started, that even when they're on that off cycle, when they're at home, would really excite them to continue thinking about what they learned. We have updated our site lately at bytespeed.com/VR apps. We now have it broken down into what do we think are some of the best STEM apps and career technical apps and elementary and middle school and high school and college. So take a look at what we consider some of those really great apps, and some of the new headsets out there like the Vive Pro that they mentioned. And we're now seeing so much more creativity. Let's kind of take a look for a second, if you're new to this environment, to kind of understand what I mean by really kind of having the student dive in, so when they're home, they could write more about it. If we were let them create on the days that we have them face-to-face. So when you go to a remote scheduling environment, they could write more about their experiences, but get inspired in those moments of face-to-face. You know, what we're seeing with all this great equipment that's out there, that nowadays it's a lot easier to take a cart. This is the newest carts that we have available. Notice how light they are. This way, the students can see the large screen. This is the high end with the experience on the CPU, and their headset, easy to roll up and down the hallway very simply, but to check it out for the day. But we're seeing some other schools actually checking out some of the what we call standalone equipment, like the Oculus Quest and the HTC Focus. For example, I teach at the college level, and we're now checking this out for home use for some of our chemistry and our nursing labs when schools are fully remote. So giving them different experiences where this type of equipment doesn't need the high-end CPU. And they're checking it out at our schools for 2 weeks at a time. That way, everyone over a semester would be able to have this for at least a couple weeks if that's their instruction. But we're making videos and so forth at home so they know exactly how to use the app and what their lab and experience will be. And you just heard from Harrison earlier, we're looking at a lot of these apps like Harrison's at Up 360 to even show students on the days that they're there, what are some of the career paths? And I think a lot of times students are going to need to know what are they interested in, and they could investigate these and then on their remote days be able to write more about careers. Take a look at Up 360's robotics lab in VR.
Man, the high Staten Island is the place I rep. I put my heart and soul into the very death. As I walk, people stare and they're like, how this kid swagger so tight? Oh my God, I'm a money-making machine. Quiet all the time, questions pop up. Where I'm getting that green, they want to know where I go, what I do, where I'm at, click, clack.
So now if they have this experience, now, for example, if they're doing career exploration, they could now investigate robotics in this case and find out, okay, what does a robotics person make? Where do you get education for this? What kind of roles do they have in their jobs? And what we're seeing even beyond this, as you're starting to kind of see these experiences and what things will look like in off times, we're even seeing some new experiences and new ways to use VR. I wanted to share with you the new Victory VR campus and their experience as well. I want you to understand that what they do is the students wear headsets and then they meet in a virtual space. And the headsets can even be these standalone headsets. So technically, they wouldn't even have to be in the school. Let's kind of take a look at a second, then I'll explain.
Now, let's start with the teeth. Everybody look at the teeth on the oral cavity.
Now, just for a second, I want you to notice there are a lot of people going around. What happens is when you put any modern headset on, the students go into what they call a virtual reality campus or classroom. And you can see who everyone is because they pick their own avatar and their name is floating above their head. Let's keep looking.
Or can you give me an example of a digestive issue that would maybe put you in a hospital or make you have to go see a doctor? Claire, what do you think?
Celiac disease.
So using the headset, the students are able to be heard. They can actually go to classroom settings that are done on a broader scope. In other words, not by their teacher, or their teacher could provide instruction within the environment.
Celiac disease. Has anybody ever heard of?
The teacher can walk around and help students one-on-one, even in this space. Take students on virtual field trips. So I want you to imagine a class of, let's say, 20 students, if there were that many headsets at a school, could then go into this virtual space and meet in different locations, well, all over this world and even above this world. Let's take a look at a virtual field trip to the moon. We're thinking of not only COVID, but post-COVID,
now let's start
experiences that are happening out there. And I want to share one of our other partners. Sorry, let's go to the right screen here. And by the way, another one of our partners, SpiritVR, is designed for science labs, primarily high school and college. And what they're doing within these science labs is they have both flat, what we call 2D labs that the students can do at home using a PC, Chromebook, Mac, any type of computer. But then they have virtual experiences for when they are face-to-face as well. So this way, the students can actually do chemistry, biology, any type of labs on any type of computer or any type of headset. Now I have to tell you, the ones on the PCs, Macs, and Chromebooks, the experience is pretty good, but the VR headset is just amazing because you have the full, immersive experience, as we all know. But they have worksheets along with their products. You can play scientists, do everything. And some of the white papers that are coming out from these companies show that with a combination of both two-dimensional labs and three-dimensional labs, that we're seeing students' test scores go up towards to 11% higher grade than if they would have just had a traditional science class. So that's pretty impressive as we go along. So just kind of think through how we can put these together. And we're even seeing students create things when they are at the school. This is a new product called Zoe. Let's take a look. What Zoe allows us to do here is allow students to create their environments in which they're learning. And this way they can design and learn. They could be doing mathematics, anything here, but this allows them to do some drag and drop coding so that they can experience gravity or different manipulations. But this works as early as 2nd and 3rd grade on up to even higher levels where they can create chemistry labs even at a higher level. So I'm seeing that there's just so many new different opportunities that are out there that we've never had before. So now that you're starting to see all of this put together, and I wanted to show you before we close here, that we even, again, here are some of the prices. In the US, some of these disposable masks, you can get anywhere from like 100 pieces for like $14 at Amazon. So really, truly, consider the low level of some of the price points here. And I wanted to show you the clean box that Harrison mentioned earlier. You can take any type of headset, and they have clean box VRs that use ultraviolet light just in one moment to sterilize things. This is really better, like Harrison said, if you have 4 or 5 of these that you want to clean at one time. But nothing can be too safe. So I love that this capability exists too. Today we also want to open it up to questions. I hope it's, let me stop sharing here real quick. I hope this kind of gave you some basis with all the things that are going on right now. In our Q&A, we have opening up to questions right now, and then we'll close with Josh. Or you're welcome to go on microphone if you'd like. Does anyone have a question for any of our panel, Christine, Harrison, myself, or Josh? Or comments? Yeah, so I'm gonna pass it back to Josh. We're gonna be doing this monthly and take on a lot of different topics, and we'll include you in the emails for all of this. Without any questions that I see, Josh, let me pass it over to you to close.
Yeah, thanks so much to Corinne and Christine and Harrison for all jumping in and sharing their expertise. We do have a question that jumped in. Let's see, just more of a comment. This is great. Thanks, Elizabeth, for your feedback. We were glad that you were able to get some good info out of our panelists today. And like Corinne mentioned, we're going to be doing these monthly. So the second Wednesday of every month at the same time. So 3 p.m. Central Time, 4 o'clock Eastern. We'll have various members of the VR industry, whether it's our 3 guests coming back for a second appearance, or we have some other members from the developers, software developers, hardware developers, other advocates for VR out in the education space. We'll cover a variety of topics. So, like today, we focused mainly on using this technology during a COVID environment, being safe, making sure everything is sanitized, showing you some of the use cases that we can do within the classroom and integrated into curriculum. So there are going to be topics every month that come out. Stay tuned. You can find a list of them on our website, or if you follow us on social media, that is another great way to stay in touch, know what the schedule is, and keep coming back, because I think we're going to have some more great discussions on really more specific topics than just, hey, VR is great, which it is. But one of the main goals for this group and these webinars is to really dive in deep on specific issues and specific topics to be able to help the schools and the other people in the community that are using VR understand what that technology can do, because it is so powerful. So thank you again for everybody for coming today and joining us. If you have other questions, feel free to send them to Bytespeed. We'd love to open up a dialogue about VR. And feel free to reach out. There will be a recording sent out with a brief survey after we're done here. And we just want to say stay safe and thank you, everyone.